requests that have been handed out. We just want to spend some time in prayer over these wonderful people. In the collection that was given to me, it seems to be alcohol and drugs is the major issue. My son Brian, 33 years old, and he is so lost in drugs that he can't be a father to his children. He can't keep a job and has very little to do with family. He is not saved, so please remember him in prayer for deliverance from drugs. Here's a prayer request. I need to quit smoking, from Oregon. I pray my husband Keith will be delivered from nicotine addiction. And then this last one, my son Joey's salvation for a job. He can't get a job because of his felony. And then for my marriage, my husband is drifting away from God and becoming an alcoholic. Let's lift these to the Lord and just ask for miracles. Lord, we just come to you, and you came to set the captives free. And so we come into agreement for these prayer requests. And we ask for deliverance, that you would take away the taste, the compulsion, the desire in Jesus' name, and that you would replace it with a desire for you, that they would pursue you with all of their heart, all of their strength, all of their being. Send salvation now. Send messengers after your own heart. You left the 99 to go for the one. So we pray for these lost sheep that they would be found and found in you. Lord, do it, for we ask it in Jesus' name. Amen and amen. We've got a special guest for you. You may be seated. His name is Keith Craft. He's the pastor of a 7,000-member church in Frisco, Texas. But he's also in part of leadership training, wonderful website, leadershipology.com, and he's got a new book out, Your Divine Fingerprint, the Force That Makes You Unstoppable. Anybody here from Regent University School of Leadership? You want a free book? Keith, come on up.
Thank you so much. Thank you very much. Great to be with you. I felt like I was just with an icon today, being Gordon with your father, and what a difference that he has made, and now that you're making all over the world. So very honored to be with you. Today I had the privilege of being hosted by Ivory, and I just think of Stevie Wonder. Ebony and Ivory. I mean, we were just riding around together. She was taking care of me. And, but you know, what was funny, she picked me up this morning and she said, listen, we're not going to have to worry about much makeup, with you. And she goes, with women, it takes a long time, but you're going to be great. And so I went in there with Sheila, the makeup girl, and I just saw this look on her face. I'd never really seen this look before, but I guess it's a makeup woman's look when she's got to do a miracle kind of look. And so she started putting something on me, and I'm not white. Ethnicity is an interesting thing to me because white is this shirt. I'm not that. My ethnicity is never listed. It's sort of peach. But what was amazing is she started making me white. I thought this is, I need more of a darker hue, not a lighter hue. And so she said, we have to do this. She goes, I opened my eyes and she said, we have to do this. I said, okay. So she made me whiter and whiter and whiter, and then made me darker and darker and darker. I'm not sure how that works. And then I saw somebody sent me a picture of the television. I said, that looks pretty good. Now, just so you know, it's off now. Like you're thinking, well, you're not looking that good. Well, we took it off. So I just want you to know that. And but genuinely, an honor here. I know some of you, chapel is just a interruption in your day. You've got a lot to do, and you come, and so thank you for being here. Others of you, you actually enjoy the break. You wish you could do this all day long. We're glad you're here too. But I also, I had the privilege today of, seeing Miss America, and she's in the crowd today. And, anytime you're around somebody that beautiful, it just makes you think you're not. But seriously, I just want to share a few minutes with you if I could. First of all, let me just say that this month is 464 months that I've been with my wife. And that's why I need a lot of makeup, because I'm a lot older than you think I am. But seriously, long story short, we met in high school. My father was a Dallas policeman. I'll get to that in just a minute. But he came in my room one day in Dallas where we lived, and he said, hey, we're moving to Louisiana. And I remember saying at 15, anything that starts with lose, I don't want to go there. I mean, we had lived, is it okay if I just talk down here? Is that okay? We had lived in the same house for years and same friends. And anyway, long story short, we go to Slidell, Louisiana, and 30 miles east of New Orleans, famous for their hurricanes, and which I did not know at that time. And so the first day I was in high school, the basketball coach comes up to me and he says, you play basketball? And I don't know why I would ask that. I was 15, I was 6'3", I weighed 165 pounds. If I turned sideways and stuck my tongue out, I looked like a zipper. I mean, I was very thin. So he said, listen, we've got a game with our crosstown rivals, the Salmon Spartans tonight. Would you like to come and sit on the bench? You can't play. You haven't practiced with us, but you look like you might can play. And so anyway, I'm sitting on the sidelines and I'm watching the game. And, my last name is Kraft, and envisioning myself, Aircraft, this is before Air Jordan was even out of diapers. And so I'm envisioning myself, and all of a sudden I got distracted because on the other side of the court, here's what I saw. Cheerleaders. And I saw this girl, and I turned to the guy next to me. I did not know. I said, who is that? She said, well, she's going steady with somebody. I just aged myself, for those of you that know, going steady. She's going steady with somebody, but there's one right down there that looks just like her. I couldn't believe it. I mean, I looked, and it was like a double mint gum commercial. How many of y'all remember the double mint gum commercials? Two in one. It was like identical twins. And at that moment, this was the thought. One is taken, one is mine. This is awesome. So I couldn't wait for that game to be over, and we went to McDonald's, which was the hangout in Slidell, and because it was the only place in Slidell for people to gather. And she was sitting with all her little cheerleader friends, and so I walked over to the table. This is my first night in town, and I looked right at her, didn't look at anybody else, and it was like everybody knew what my agenda was except her. Like, I'm looking right at her. I said, hey, I'm Keith. They got up. They didn't say a word. They got up and left giggling. And I said, would you like a Dr. Pepper? And she said, well, yes. And so I went and got her Dr. Pepper and brought it back. And she said, you mind if I ask you a question? I said, no. She said, why did you ask me if I wanted a Dr. Pepper? Why didn't you say, do you want a Coke or something? I said, because all the girls in Dallas drink Dr. Pepper. She goes, oh, I just wondered that. So anyway, isn't this story interesting? Aren't you glad I am the chapel speaker today? You say, is everything going to be this detailed? I'm going somewhere. So she took her first sip, Gordon, of a Dr. Pepper. Well, we're sitting there talking, and I said, hey, I'm new in town. She said, I know. My heart just skipped a beat when she said that. And I said, do you have some school annuals, at your house? Because I'd like to learn more about the school. And so she said, sure. And I said, well, can we go? We go over there. So she said, Isn't that an interesting dynamic? Now, I took the lid off. Now that thing's on there. Now I can't, oh, there it went, okay. The lid wasn't ready to screw back on because that thing had not disengaged. Just thought you wanted to see that. But anyway, so we go over to her house. And so she goes, okay, I'll be right back. And so we're sitting in her parents' living room. And she comes back in literally with an armful of annuals. And she starts to open the annuals. I said, hey, I must be honest. She said, what? I said, I don't care about seeing those. She goes, you don't? I said, no, I don't. I said, I just want to talk. She said, okay. And I said, I want to tell you that I'm a born-again, Spirit-filled Christian. She just got this look like Sheila had on her face when she saw me and knew what it was going to take to make this work for CBN. She didn't say a word. She got up and walked out of the room. And I thought, well, I've taken my stand for God, because I thought in my mind Gordon and I would never, date a girl that didn't know God. I mean, I'd already made that decision as a young man. And so I'm getting up, getting ready to go, when all of a sudden her and her mother come walking back in. And her mother goes, so you're a born-again, Spirit-filled Christian? I stuck out my chest I didn't have. I said, yes, ma'am, I am. She goes, that's so wonderful. We've been believing God for somebody that our daughter could be friends with. And I said, I'm here. It's me. It's me. That was one of the greatest days of my life. It was like destiny. I was an answer to prayer. I don't know if you've ever been an answer to anybody's prayer, but you really have been, by the way. But I was that day. Well, long story short, we 1 month later, it was January 20th, 1976, and we're in that same room, light blue, French provincial Ethan Allen couch. And as we're sitting there, I said, I'd like you to be my girlfriend. We'd known each other for 1 month. I was ready. And I said, will you go steady with me? She said, before you say anything, I said, I have this philosophy about relationships. She goes, really? I remember we're 15. I said, yes. So I pulled out a piece of paper and I drew a triangle. And I said, this is you, this is me, this is God. And then I drew 2 arrows and I said, I feel like if you'll be your best for God and I'll be my best for God, then we really will meet at the top. I said, what do you think about that? She goes, I like that. And then I drew another arrow underneath it and I said, and I think he'll make this work as long as we're together. I said, what do you think? She goes, well, I like that. I said, well, there's a couple other things. She goes, really? I said, really? I said, there's this scripture in the Bible and it says, when you get mad, because I said, we're going to get mad at each other. Don't let the sun go down on your anger and give your enemy a foothold. And I said, I've got this philosophy about relationship. If you really try to work it out and not just walk away and practice divorce, that you won't ever get divorced. I think you can make it work if you try to make it work. I said, so, if you're going to go steady with me, could we always try to make it work and not just walk away mad? She goes, yeah, I think that'd be a great idea. So little did I know that I was setting some core values in place when I was 15 years old. I didn't know to call them core values, but it was excellence. You be your best for God. I'll be my best for God. Let's don't try to be each other's answer. Let's both work towards being our best for God. I didn't know that I was introducing a conflict resolution strategy and that conflict resolution was actually important to me. You see, most people have never identified that conflict resolution is important to them Because the greatest pain you'll ever have is from conflict that you can't resolve. I didn't know that I was establishing that as a core value, but I was. Hey, let's don't ever walk away and practice divorce. Let's do our best to try to work it out. I didn't know I was establishing a core value of communication. Let's just always talk. Let's don't stop talking. And then lastly, I didn't know when I turned to her and said, well, will you go steady with me? And she said, yes. I didn't know when I told her that on the 20th of every month, for as long as we're together, I'm going to celebrate you. I didn't know that I was establishing a core value of honor, but that's what I was establishing with her. That was 464 months ago this month. We just celebrated our 464th anniversary together. And on the 20th of every month, I give her cards and flowers and gifts. And you know what? Here's the truth. The truth is that when I first started, I never pictured, Gordon, that 464 months, how important consistency is. That when you say you're going to do something, that you do it. And what it develops in you every time you remember to do what you say that you were going to do. You see, I just never realized it. I never realized when I started that way that 464 months I'd have the most wonderful person in my life. More than I could have ever dreamed. I never thought that together we would be able to produce eeny, meeny, and miny, because she said no mo. I never thought I'd get to have a son like I have, that's 26 years old, about to turn 27. That when he was in college, he went to RU, and he's in college, he came to me and he said, Dad, you know, I don't really think I need this. I just want to be with you. I said, no, you need this because you want to be with me. Today he's my lead associate at 26 in our church. And I never knew when I would celebrate his mother that my children were watching on the 20th of every month. I remember going to his school and saying, hey, Josh, because he was so slow with girls. Like, I'm not slow. I'm like the first day I'm in town. Hey, can I come over to your house? I mean, I'm like that. I'm like, my dad taught me you can't hit if you don't swing. You know how he taught me that? Another story. I was in about the 7th grade, Gordon, about 12 years old. We're driving down the road in his 39 Packard. We'd just go for drives because I loved cars, still love cars. And we're driving down the road, and I saw Sally. And I said, man, Dad, she is pretty. In the middle of the road on Clarendon in Cockrell Hill, Oak Cliff, Dallas, he stops the car and he says, go say hi to her. I said, no, Dad, listen. I just said she was pretty. That's it. He goes, and he looked at me and he said, you can't hit if you don't swing. Go say hi to her. I said, okay. So I got out of the car. I looked back at him. And I walked right up to Mustang Sally. I said, hi. She said, hi. I said, my dad stopped the car. She's looking at me. And I said, because I wanted to tell you something. She goes, you stopped the car because you wanted to tell me? I said, yes, my dad stopped the car because... She goes, what did you want to tell me? I said, that you're pretty. She goes, y'all stopped the car to tell me that? I said, yes, he did. Yes, he did. She goes, give me a hug. Well, anyway, so I give her a hug, walk back to the car, and then my dad looked at me and he said, for the rest of your life, remember that it's not about Sally. You can't hit if you don't swing. I said, yes, sir. I got it. Now, back to current 1975. No, but my son at ORU, I would go to his school and I'd say, Josh, what about her? What about her? And he'd go, Dad, listen, chill. I'm okay. I go, no, you need a girl, son. You need a girl. I'll go with you. Finally, a sophomore year, he sat down with me. He said, Dad, look, I have a plan. I want to graduate. I want to get my first house. I said, okay. He said, well, he did all that, bought his first house, has a girlfriend. I never knew when I said the 20th was going to be a day that I celebrated Sheila every month that he would say, hey, you became my girlfriend on the 1st, and I'm going to celebrate you on the 1st as long as we're together. And so I don't know how many anniversaries they've had. I can't keep up with everybody's. But he'll be married in October, but they have monthly anniversaries. I never knew that the core values that I had were so important to my children, to my tribe. How I thought, how I was as a person, and my actions would affect everybody around me. Well, I have a daughter named Keela. When she was 11, she came to me and she said, Dad, I know what I want on my tombstone. I said, wait, what are you saying? She goes, you're going to outlive us all? You said you're going to be healthy to 150 and press 2,000 pounds with your legs like Pat Robertson. No, she didn't say that. Your dad he went into that with me today. He's like, man, I lift weights. And it was amazing. We had a great little talk. But she said, Dad, you've talked about how you're going to live to be 150. You're going to be healthy. So she goes, I know what I want on my tombstone. I said, what? She goes, she was a warrior for God. That's what I want. I said, okay. Well, today she's 25. She's on our staff. And she always had this dream that she would meet an orphan. I mean, when she was a teenager, she started, I want to marry an orphan. I said, Keela, what in the world are you talking about? We want you to marry into a good family. She goes, I want to marry an orphan because they will be with a good family. I said, okay. He was 9 years old when he started coming to our church. And that was in 2000. He wasn't a total orphan, but his mother was a drug addict, and the man that she was currently with was not her husband, that she had 2 children by. And the man before that was Brendan's father, who was never her husband, and since then has had multiple men and multiple children. In and out of church, but Brendan, 9-year-old Brendan, stayed connected to the house of God, was raised in the house of God, was raised as a son of the house. And last year, 2 years ago, he wrote Sheila and I a letter and said, I've never really had a family. My family's been so dysfunctional. The only time I've really talked to my father was the day he died. And I don't know if you'd ever consider this, but I would be so honored to take your last name. That was 2 years ago. I said, I'm going to have to think about this. I'm going to have to pray about this, Sheila. I'm going to, this is a big deal when somebody asks to take your name. It's a big deal for a lot of reasons, especially just as a man to take somebody else's name and on and on. So we did not move on that, but I told him I'd pray about it and think about it because I wanted the best for him, most importantly. And long story short, a year ago, he and my daughter started dating. And they're going to be married this year. And he came to me yesterday again and he said, I don't want her to take my name. I want to take your name. Their anniversary is on the 7th of every month. I didn't know on the 20th when I was 15, when I said, I'm going to honor you on this day, that all these years later, my daughters would be honored the same way. Then there's Whitney. Whitney's my oxygen. Whitney's like Terry. You know, that's how Terry is. Y'all know that, right? Terry Meeuwsen. By the way, Mark Bloom told me to tell you hello. Mark Bloom's on my staff now. He was at CBN here for 10 years. I don't know what he did. Please don't hold it against me. I don't know, but he's one of the craziest people I've ever met. Quick story about Mark Bloom. I was speaking for this group in California called the Navy SEALs. Maybe you've heard of them. SEAL Team 3 invited me to come and do some leadership training with them. And I met a man by the name of Mark Bloom in San Diego at a church where I was speaking simultaneously. And I looked at him and I said, he introduced himself as Mark Bloom. And I said, Mark, I don't know how long we're going to know each other, but you're not going to be Mark Bloom to me. You're Mark Dean. He goes, and all of a sudden his eyes started watering a little bit. He goes, why would you say that to me? I said, because that's what I see in you. I don't see Mark, I see Mark Dean. He said, that was my father's name. He just passed away and he was my hero. Pretty amazing. Anyway, that was just a side story. So Whitney's my last born. Whitney is 23 years old. When she was 15, she came to me and she said, Dad, if I could CLEP out of high school, could I CLEP out of high school? Because I just want to worship. I just want to be on your staff as a worship leader. So I said, okay, Whitney, you know I'm not the sharpest knife in the drawer. What does CLEP out of high school mean? For real. She goes, I think I can take some tests and actually not have to do all of my high school. And I said, well, Whitney, if you can do that, I knew she made straight. I said, if you can do that, I said, that would be amazing. That time I was speaking in the world's largest business and leadership seminars, and she said, I just want to travel with you. I want to sing at those events. I want to be on your worship. So sure enough, she CLEPs out of high school. She's 15. She starts traveling all over with me. She meets every living president. She meets Margaret Thatcher. She meets Mikhail Gorbachev. The list goes on and on and on and on. I'll never forget our first trip. This is so funny because, you know, I'm a pastor, and don't hold that against me, by the way, but I'm a pastor. So in these big leadership events that we do, like they do the private jet and the limos and all that. So they pick us up, you know, they take us in a private jet, pick us up in a limo. So this is her first trip with me. And so we're holding hands in the back seat of the limo, and I said, hey, Whitney, this is my other life. This is great. She didn't even say anything. She just gets this big smile on her face. She goes, Dad, I do not care about any of this. I go, well, you don't have to care about it, but just enjoy it. It's like she goes, I just want to worship. I go, really? Really? Are you that pure? I mean, really? I just want to worship? So anyway, totally unimpressed with that. In this same year she CLEPs out of high school, this kid that we had known his whole life. In fact, I'd known him before he sprang from his mother's womb. I knew him when he was still in his mother's womb. 9 years older than my daughter. Comes to me when she's 15, and he says, I feel like your daughter is the kind of person that I want to marry. In fact, she is the person I want to marry. I said, why in the world would you say that? Because I just know. We'd known him his whole life. But he's this old guy. He's an old guy. He said, you just tell me what I need to do, or if there's nothing, no way it can happen. I said, well, passion has to be discovered, it has to be developed, and it has to be deployed. I said, so here's how it's going to work. The first year, you don't say anything to her. You don't ever have this conversation with her. You don't, and I pulled my coat off and flex. I said, you don't tell her what you just told me. You just be her friend with all of her other friends. He goes, okay. I said, the second year, we're gonna develop the passion. You can kind of be with her and y'all can do some things. First year, you can't do anything with her other friends. You can just be there. When they go do something, you go away. Second year, you can do things with them, but only with other people. Third year, we'll deploy the passion. And here's what that means. Then you can tell her all this time how you felt about her and see what she says. He went through all that, did that exact thing. And on her 18th birthday, they became girlfriend and boyfriend. She'd never kissed another boy, ever. Again, very unlike, that part, that's not like me. I'm like, so, they'd been together for about a year, and he comes to me and he says, I want to ask her to marry me, and I'd like to ask your permission to do that, and I want to do it on the Eiffel Tower. I said, really? I thought I was a romantic. Long story short, a year later, his parents are there. She doesn't know it. We're there for a birthday trip for my other daughter. We go up to the top of the Eiffel Tower. We come off the elevator, go around to the left. He's down on one knee with about 100 Frenchmen gathered around, and he asked her to marry. Anyway, I'm going to speak to y'all today, but I want to tell you about my family first. I'm so blessed to have them work with me. It's a dream come true that they are serving God, but it's heaven on earth that they actually, Gordon, I know your dad, I'm sure he tells you this all the time. But when your kids know you and they still want to not like be in your family, but they're willing to work with you, it is your heaven on earth. It's your heaven on earth. And so, anyway, I just wanted you to meet my family a little bit. I actually go into pretty much depth on, if there is more depth, if you can imagine, in my book, on Your Divine Fingerprint, because here's today what I came to talk to you about. All of that, yes, is a part of it. My father was a Dallas policeman. He was a crime scene investigator before there was CSI. And he was the first man up at the Texas Book Depository. Found Lee Harvey Oswald's rifle, found the chicken box. Before the FBI took over the investigation, he was the kind of guy when he'd ask my brother and I, who did it? We would never go, not me. My dad said, who did it? We go, I did it. No, I did it. No, I did it. Anyway, because the dust would come out. If we lied, I mean, we just didn't, there was no lying. It was like, who did it? It's like, no, that's your fingerprint. Listen, I got it. That's you. So I grew up with this awareness of fingerprint. Then I'm 14 years old. I'm sitting in church. The pastor says, look at your hand. I looked at my hand. So I'm going to ask you to do the same thing. Everybody just look at your hand right now. Just play along with me. Those of you that are struggling a little bit with me, just play along with me. Just look at your hand. And at the end of your fingertips, I want to tell you something that you know, but I want it to become a revelation. I hope a revelation for you today like never before. That day, the pastor said, you have a fingerprint that nobody else has. And I thought, I've heard that before. But then the next voice was the voice of God. And I don't play with this when I tell you God spoke to me. He said to leave an imprint that nobody else can leave. So look up here at me now. Why would God give you a fingerprint that nobody's ever had? I remember I was about 10 years old. My dad had me down in the bowels of the Dallas Police Department. And that's where they took all the prisoners and did the fingerprinting. And so he's fingerprinting me one day. And I said, Dad, why are you fingerprinting me? Why do you fingerprint people? He said, to identify them at the scene of a crime. And I asked him this question. I said, is that why people have a fingerprint? So you can identify them for something that they've done wrong? He gave me about a 10-minute forensic science lesson about our DNA and all kinds of things. And he said, that's all we've known to do with a fingerprint. But can I just tell you something? God didn't give you a fingerprint so you could be identified for something wrong that you've done. But he gave you something that unique that science could use it, and science has used it for the last 100 years in that way to solve some pretty major crimes. By 1984, through genome science, we discovered that 99% of our DNA sequence is the same. Red, yellow, black, or white, no matter if you're born in Africa, no matter what time in history that you've ever been born, if you are a humanoid, 99% of your DNA is all the same. There's only a 1% difference between everybody that ever has been born and everybody that ever will be born. In other words, there's something about you that's so unique about you that's so much more than just your fingerprint. Your fingerprint is evidence of how unique you are. But what's so unique about you, I believe, and I just mentioned it on the show, is that when Jesus prayed this prayer in John 17, he said, God, you've given me your glory, now I give it to them. I was raised in church, I knew I needed to be saved. I was raised in church, I knew I needed to be baptized in the Holy Spirit. I was raised in church, and I knew I needed the fruit of the Spirit: love, joy, peace, gentleness, goodness, faith, meekness, temperance, long-suffering. Against that there's no law. I was raised in church, and I knew that I needed to be led by the Spirit and not walk according to my own lust and my own flesh. I knew all that, but I had never heard, growing up in great churches, I had never heard that I had been given the glory of God. I'd never heard that. And all of a sudden, one day, I heard it. And it correlated. That 1% difference that's in each one of us, because we are God's sons and are God's daughters. How many of you believe you are a son and daughter of God? Because we are God's sons and we are God's daughters, that one unique percent difference that you have that nobody else has, I believe, is a deposit of God's glory that is unique to you, that the world has never seen, that's your imprint of God. But you have to discover it. You have to develop it. You have to deploy it. I came today and I had some notes, but I didn't ever get to the notes. But I simply want to tell you this. Matthew 16, Jesus looked at his disciples and he said, now this is his legacy. He said, who do men say that I am? Well, some say that you're John the Baptist, Jeremiah, one of the prophets, Elijah. But who do you say that I am? See, you can work at CBN and just be in this environment all the time. And what can just bypass you is the reality that you bring a deposit of God's glory to this place that this place has never seen. Whether you mow the lawns, whether you teach a class, there's something unique about God's glory that has aligned you with this place that makes this place a capacitor, if you will, or a capacitator for the glory of God that's increased because of you. Well, it was Peter that spoke up and said, you are the Christ, you are the Son of the living God. And Jesus said, blessed are you, because flesh and blood did not reveal this to you, but my Father who is in heaven. And then here's what he said. Upon this rock I will build my church. And watch this. And the gates of hell shall not be able to prevail against it. Can I just remind you who the church is? It's us. Can I just remind you, if Jesus said hell can't stop us, then what's stopping you? What's stopping me? What's stopping you from developing, discovering, deploying the grace of God that's in us? What's stopping us? Let me tell you what stops us. Life stops us. Let me tell you what stops us. Hurt stops us. Let me tell you what stops us. We stop us. But the reality is that Jesus said the gates of hell will not be able to prevail against you. And yet how many of us have had different things in our life that have just stopped us? I mentioned my father to you. Were you okay on time? I mentioned my father to you. He said I only had 3 hours, so I'm going as fast as I can. My father did not know God, and yet went to church and was on the board of an Assembly of God church. He did not know God. I remember I was about 11 or 12, and I go, you shouldn't be on the board of a church. He goes, what are you talking about? I said, you don't know God, Dad. He goes, that has nothing to do with it. They like me. Truthfully. He said, I know who God is. You see, you can know who God is and not know God. My dad used to take me to school in a squad car from time to time, and Now, again, talking about fingerprint. And I hope this frees some of you up today to be the wonderful you that you are. To this day, if my dad and I ride together, if I can, I ride right next to him. He's 83. I would slide over next to him in his squad car and I'd put my arm around him. We'd drive down the road. And at 12, in the 7th grade, I was almost as big as my dad. True story. He's about 5'9". I'm 6'6". We'd drive to school and he'd pull up in the front of the school and his hands would be on the steering wheel just like this. Now, this didn't happen every day because he didn't take me to school every day, but every time he took me to school, this is what happened. He'd be looking straight ahead and go, have a good day, Keith. And I'd look at him right in his ear. And I'd go, Dad, now you know that's not going to work. He'd just look straight ahead. I'd say, I love you, Dad. He'd go, I go, come on. Say it with me, Dad. He would. He'd go, I love you. It was very difficult for him. And he'd be looking straight ahead. Then I would take his face and I would turn his face towards me like this. I'd look him right in his eyes, and here's what he'd be doing. He knew what was about to come. He knew. But he'd be going, I go, look at me, Dad. He'd look at me. I go, I love you, Dad. And I'd kiss him right on his lips. He'd shake his head and go, okay, Keith, okay. Have a good day. I'd get out of the car, true story, a lot of my friends, when I say a lot, 4 to 6 guys would always be there watching the show. They'd get out, I'd get out and say, they wouldn't say anything to me because I was bigger than all of them. They'd go, hey, Keith, I go, hey. They'd kind of laugh, you know. My mother would give me the business about this. She'd say, Keith Allen, that's my middle name, used as a curse word. How many of y'all's middle names were used as a curse word by your parents? You never heard your middle name unless it was, ha! Okay, she'd go, Keith Allen, your father is a public servant. You cannot do what you're doing. You cannot slide over next to him in a squad car. You cannot put your arm around him. You cannot be kissing on him. You cannot put your hand on his leg. She goes, honestly, Keith Allen, you and your father look like a couple of homosexuals going down the road in a squad car. That's what she said. One day she's telling me that story for about the 50th time, and I broke and I started crying. I said, Mom, God showed me something. She goes, what? I said, you know how Dad didn't have a dad? She goes, yes. I said, God spoke to me to love him as a son the way his dad never loved him as a son. I said, so with your permission, I'm going to keep kissing him. I'm going to keep holding his hand, even though it looks like he's walking around with a little gorilla. I said, would you let me keep doing that? By this time, she's crying. She goes, yes, okay, yes. You see, too often times, we don't know how powerful our divine fingerprint is, and we stop being us because somebody wasn't them. I want to encourage you today. Get your divineness back. Get your God power back. Get your glory back. And leave that imprint everywhere you go. Don't think you're in a useless job. If you're cutting grass out here, just know the glory of God. This place, listen, this place has been touching the world for over 50 years. The grass matters here. What you do matters here. You know why? Because the glory of God is going throughout the earth from this place. It matters. It matters. One last story. Guys, if you would, I know I'm messing you up there, but just put the newspaper article up here, if you would. That's me. I know I look Not as good as Sheila made me look, but I look pretty good there. That's my dad, Jimmy the cop that I just talked about. And by the way, my dad didn't know the Lord when he was 67 years old, had a massive heart attack. And they put him in the heart transplant unit in Baylor Hospital, one of the leading medical centers in America. And when they try, the most critical part of heart surgery is when they take you off the lung machine and off the heart machine to see if everything will work after they did surgery. And for 4 days it didn't work. And I told the doctor, I said, listen, he said, we don't know if he's ever going to be able to breathe on his own. And I said, I'm going to go in there every hour on the hour and pray over him until it happens. And the doctor said, no, you're not. And I said, no, listen, here's the thing. That's exactly what I'm going to do. So he goes, okay, you do that every hour on the hour. I'll let the nurses know. So I would go in, and I would take him by the hand, and he's strapped down, because they don't want him to pull the tubes out of his throat, and so he can't speak. And I'd grab his hand, I'd go, Dad, you're going to live and not die. Dad, your best days hadn't been lived yet. Dad, God's going to visit you while you're lying down like this, and when you get up, you're going to know he's real. I did that for 4 days. When they finally pulled the tube out, and it worked, for the first time in my dad's life and in my life, he lifted up his hands and he goes, God is real. God is real. Anyway, that's my dad. Today's 83, and I'm his favorite preacher. I just wanted to brag on myself for a minute. He goes, you're my favorite preacher. I go, thanks, Dad. That's my beautiful mother. She's 78, and she'd walk in here and you'd think she was Terry Meeuwsen almost. She's that beautiful. That's my older brother, and that's my mama on the back. In case you don't have 2010 vision, let me read this for you. This was Thanksgiving Day, 1961. Young Keith Allen Craft will be a real-life Thanksgiving blessing this year to his parents, Mr. and Miss James M. Craft, his grandmother, Miss Fred Ferguson, and his brother, Bruce Craft. The boy suffocated, but was brought back to life earlier this year. I hope you don't have to go through what I went through to make the front page of Virginia Beach or Norfolk News. But I died. Long story short, last thing I want to tell you is this. My mother had left the house to go to a choir banquet. My mama would come over to take care of us, and my mother put me in a playpen next to the bed. The playpen was about bed height, but I'm down in the playpen. She took her dress that she was going to be wearing out of a plastic laundry clothes bag, didn't think anything about it, put it on the bed. She walked out of the room. She'd been gone for about 30 minutes when my brother, who you see in the picture, walked into the kitchen where my mama was and said, Mama, Keith's all blue. Well, my mama didn't think anything about it because look at his pose in the picture. Now, later, I would realize what this meant. The plastic bag didn't work. Okay, I'm just telling you, he was very mischievous. This was his. I mean, you'd think a photographer would notice that. But the point is, he captured the true him. It's like, there he is getting all the camera right there in front. Okay, what's the next thing we can use? Okay, so my mama just ignored him because she thought, blue, okay. So she goes, you leave your brother alone. He comes in about 15 minutes later, grabs her dress, this time says, Mama, Keith's all blue. Well, all of a sudden she started thinking, maybe he's found a Mark's Lot or something. I better go check on Keith. She goes into the room where my mother had left me now, 30, 40, 45 minutes earlier. And what she didn't realize is that a plastic bag had totally enveloped me. She wasn't even correlating. She looked down, I was just blue. She pulled the laundry clothes bag off of me. Blood was coming from my nose and my mouth and my ears. She picked up my lifeless body. She began to pray. She went out to the corner of our street, 4416 West Clarendon, after she called the emergency number. And in 1961, there wasn't a lot of emergency centers on every corner. The hospital was about 25 or 30 minutes from our house, and the ambulance was dispatched, and she stood out there on the corner and waited the whole time. 15 minutes passed, 20 minutes passed, 25. At about the 30-minute mark, not an ambulance, but a fire truck came rushing down the street. E.R. Kaufman, the fireman that was on duty, jumped out of the fire truck and he said, Ma'am, I am so sorry. The ambulance had a flat tire. And he took one look at me and later would say he knew that I was dead, but But he didn't tell my mom all that. He just said, how long has he been like this? She said, I don't even know. I've been out here for 30 minutes, but I don't know how long it was even before that, but a long time. It was over an hour. No breath, no nothing in my body. They tried oxygen. They tried mouth-to-mouth resuscitation. They tried everything they could try. Nothing worked. They pronounced me dead on the scene. They pulled a sheet over me. And it was at that point that my mama prayed a prayer like this. She said, God, you're the giver of life. And the same power that raised Jesus from the dead can raise this boy from the dead. And I ask you in Jesus' name to do it. And she prayed a prayer something like that, but probably more forceful, knowing my mama. And literally a breath of air blew out of my body, blew the sheet off of me. The fireman jumped back, and my mama starts doing this. You know, she's just like, she's worshiping God. She's like, this is the whole premise for my book. Your divine fingerprint, the force that makes you unstoppable. You see, the real story on my mama is, if you rewind 5 years earlier, she was diagnosed with breast cancer. In 1955, breast cancer was a death sentence. It's still, nobody wants to hear it today, but 1955 it was a death sentence. The same day she found out she had breast cancer, my grandfather took that occasion to say, if they're going to have to remove your breast, that means you're not going to be a woman anymore. And he revealed that he'd been having a long-term affair with her best friend and left her the same day. What you can't see in the picture is that she's got kind of a higher collar on, but they made her sign all these papers. They had this new laser treatment for, you know, it wasn't like chemo today or anything. It was like, we can try to burn this cancer out of your body. And they burnt her from her neck all the way to, she would live the rest of her life with open wounds on her body. And here's all I want to leave you with this. That day she stood on the curb. She didn't say, well, God, you didn't heal my cancer, so I guess you can't do anything about this. Well, God, you didn't heal my broken heart, and my husband left me after 30 years and 4 kids, so I guess you can't do anything about this. She became an unstoppable force as she wrapped her divine fingerprints around me and continued to pray and continued to believe. And when all hope was gone, she held on. And I'm here today because she prayed. She lived to be 88 years of age. We started a church January 9th, 2000. She wasn't in our first service. I took her a VHS, because that's what we used back then. And that night we watched the church service. And as we sat there together and she rubbed my nose the way that she did, she looked at me and she said, honey, I'm just so proud. She goes, you were born for this. This is why God raised you from the dead, to proclaim his name in the earth. The next morning she woke up in heaven. Can I just tell you, I don't know where you are in your life right now, what's going on, but you have a fingerprint that nobody else has, to leave an imprint that nobody else can leave. It's the glory of God in you. And I just came here today to remind you of that. Thank you for your time. Thank you for the privilege of being here today. God bless you guys very much. Thank you. Thank you.